Welcome to the Breathing Edge podcast. And today we have a very special guest that we've done lots of work with. And so I'm excited to be bringing him onto our podcast, Mr. Simon Bowen. And I just want to give you a little bit of background of who this genius is that we are talking to right now. He's the founder of the Models Method. He's the creator of the Genius Model. He is an international keynote speaker, consultant, author, and industry thought leader. So Simon basically turns complex thoughts and ideas into powerful million-dollar visual models that drive revenue and growth. So a little bit about him and his background is in electrics and electronics, teaching, university, lecturing, executive management. I know you've done a lot of stuff in the corporate space, so in corporate consulting, peak performance coaching. And Simon's unique blend of perspectives has resulted in a truly unique framework of thinking and influence that is changing the way business leaders and consultants and salespeople unpack complex concepts and influence others towards agreement with their ideas.
Yeah, and really it's just...
Which you've helped us with ours,
yes.
And that's why we're talking today.
Getting stuff out of people's heads and onto paper,
Sure.
And writing it all down is one thing, but getting it out of people's heads and placing it into a simplified model that can just speak on many different levels about what things are doing. I mean, that's amazing. It was amazing to us to witness that when we first sat with you and went through, because our ideas are crazy
and all over the place.
and everywhere. And so, you helped us to contain it down. So really, for us, Simon, creativity is a big part of what we do. And I think it's a big part of being an entrepreneur and a business person. So just, speak to us about your models and how this all came about for you.
Sure. Creativity. So I don't think of myself as a expert in creativity. So there are people that will go into organizations and work with executive teams to elevate their level of creativity and things like that. And that isn't our agenda. That isn't what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is release creative thought that was already there. Because the interesting thing is the most creative people on the planet are children. And there's some really, I come from an education background as a part of my career, and I was stunned when I read some clear research that says that by the time children have finished primary school, we've taken more than 75% of their creative flow out of them, taken it out of them. In other words, the containment of structured, organized schooling says to a child, these are the boundaries. This is exactly how you should do this. So even think about the process of learning to write. And so why do I place so much emphasis on visual models as thinking tools and influence tools, right? So for anybody that's a thought leader or a business owner or an entrepreneur, a manager, parents, anybody that, is taking on a responsibility for a higher level of performance, you've got two challenges. The first challenge is to convince people that your thought, what you think, really matters, and therefore they should do something with it. And the second challenge is to make sure that your thought, what you think, actually really does matter. So we've got two responsibilities in there, and they go backwards. Like, think clearly. Don't be lazy. Don't do lazy thinking. Do deep thinking. You can't be shallow and deep at the same time. And too many people are shallow. And, you can't float across the top of the lake and also at the same time experience what's going on at the bottom, where the real mystery is. And so, philosophy is, I studied philosophy at uni, for a number of years. And philosophy is this process of going deep into a thought process to find space. So what do you need for creativity? You actually need emptiness. And people don't get their heads around that much. People think creative thinking is about thinking about more stuff, but creative thinking actually comes from emptiness when you have space. And so that's why you've got to go deep. And so thinking by using a mental model firstly, creates spaces. It gives you a geometry, a shape, but it's empty. And the mind starts going, what's in those spaces? How do the spaces connect together? If we think about the genius model, our flagship model, which is just a powerful selling tool, organizational tool, leadership tool. It's a Venn diagram, and most people draw a 3-circle Venn diagram and they don't fill in the spaces between the circles. Well, that's a triangle. if you draw 3 overlapping circles and you don't label the spaces in between the circles, what you actually got's a triangle. So empty space requires the mind to fill it, and the mind becomes creative. The other thing about children, and so when we say to children, you must learn to write, lockstep, here's how you do that, we stop them from drawing. What do children learn to do first, draw or write?
Draw for sure.
Well, they don't actually learn it, they do it instinctively.
Yeah.
You don't teach a child to draw, they just draw.
Yeah.
They start scribbling, and then they look and they observe, and then the scribble kind of takes these weird shapes, and they go, it's daddy. You go, okay. But eventually it'll kind of match up, it'll be a stick figure. And their mind is evolving, and they're filling in spaces, but they're doing it creatively because they're doing it themselves without being taught. And then we lockstep them into, here's how you write, this is the formation of the letters, this is language. Language is linear and lockstep. Just process that for a moment. Language is linear and lockstep. And humans can't hold on to a concept if we can't express it in words. So imagine going 30 years in the past to a high school kid doing an assignment, and he says, I don't know what to do with this assignment. You say, just Google it, mate. 30 years ago, he didn't have the word Google. He doesn't understand the concept. So language is linear and lockstep, and if we don't have a word, we can't hold on to the concept. However, our Indigenous people in Australia, 40 to 60,000 years old, didn't have words, but they had cave art and they held on to concepts, and some of them were quite complex. Space-like figures, aliens and stuff like this, like higher level thoughts, some really deep understanding of nature and spirituality and things carved into, and painted on cave walls in a visual artistic form. And so for me, a model is about the artistry of thinking. And then it's about the artistry of influence. So I've got to, I think people have got to do the hard work first, think deeply, use some thinking mechanisms to walk through it, and then communicate clearly. Because your idea only becomes valuable when it turns into a communication that other people can understand, agree with, and then, this is the key piece, transport to other people. Your idea only becomes valuable when you can communicate it in a way that it becomes understandable, agreeable, and transportable. Otherwise, it's of no use to anyone. It's just in your head. It's an idea. And, so I think creativity is like everything around the two of us were sitting in different locations, but everything around us was a creative thought first. And it is an interesting thing. You've got to have emptiness for creativity to emerge. There is a model that I can walk through in a minute that actually helps people understand where how you can elevate up and come down to creativity, so I can put more structure to it. But it's that first thought. You've got to go to an empty space. And there's I have 2 places where my mind can go empty, and then I've discovered a third one. One of them is not a safe place for my mind to go empty, but it's when I'm riding my bike. Now, that's not the best place for your mind to go empty, because you should be paying attention to what's happening. But I get so many ideas when I'm riding my push bike, right? Because the brain is just shutting down and getting into, and then this idea pops into my mind, $1 million idea, bam, there it is. I go, stop the bike, record on the phone, because I'm sure enough, I'm going to forget that by the time I get back, right? Isn't it interesting how the most creative, brilliant thoughts last for that long and then they're gone?
Yeah. In the shower.
Well, that's the second place, right? That is the safe place for it to happen. The second place it happens for me is in the shower. But I have this idea in the shower, I go, bam, that's it. That's $1 million idea. When I get out, I'm going to write that down. But between shampooing my hair, the 5 other thoughts I've had in the shower, including, oh, we've got to get that form off to so-and-so, and then drying myself and I'm going to write this down and get out. And you got to write it down. And it's never as good as the first thought. Because real genius is fleeting. Real creative genius is fleeting because the space is fleeting.
Wow.
And when you come back out of the space, all the other stuff starts to cloud the thought and you can't catch it like it was, right?
Yep.
Here's the solution in the shower. Aqua notes. Shower, mate.
Are you going to say some kind of
waterproof notepads?
I've just been making it hot so I can draw with my finger on the wall.
No, it's waterproof paper. And they in America, you can buy Aqua Notes. In Australia, you can go to Booktopia and buy, it's called Shower Mate. It's a little notepad, sticks on the wall. It's got 40 sheets in, and it's waterproof paper.
I love it.
And you can stand under the running water, hold the paper under the running water with a pencil and write on it.
Wow.
And it doesn't smudge, and then you just come out and there's your idea.
I love it.
And who knew it was a problem? But apparently it is, because now people make Aqua Notes and Shower Mate. But, you know, I put a post on LinkedIn about it, and then a fellow contacted and went, well, it's because of the iron in the water, and gave me a whole lot of science. I love science. So they gave me I'm going, that's cool. That makes sense. But I also think it's just, you find space, right? But the space is fleeting. But what if you could create that space anytime? This is the third option. What if you could create that space anytime you wanted and just go there and not be wet or on a bike? Wouldn't that be good?
Yeah,
that would be better.
We know a few ways for that.
I've learnt some too. So you know the first time I did the breathing with you guys, when you threatened to throw me in an ice bath afterwards, and to say I had a little bit of resistance up was not I wasn't resistant to the breathing, the ice bath, not happy about that, but I did it, in the end. But the unexpected experiences for my first time breathing with you, and apart from the energy lift you get, which you can get from short breathings and things, but that space is worth everything. And then I think one time, Shane, I had done some breathing, and then he just handed me my iPad, because it's pretty certain.
I knew that once that space was created,
of course,
I knew that something would flow through.
It's pretty certain. So what if you could go into a space and know it's going to happen? How cool would that be? Like, it's going to happen if you're a thinking person, and there's this thing you're working on. What if you knew you could go into the space and it's going to happen? See, up until I did breathing, I had to get in the shower. Hey, God, I got 6 showers. That's not good.
Well, I'd studied lots of past geniuses, and everybody referred to the hypnagogic state. There was I don't know whether it was Einstein. You might be able to confirm this for me or not. But one of them used to hold a ball in their hand, and they would sit in the chair and just rest until they were hitting that point right when they were about to fall asleep. And this is where they'd catch all their ideas. Yeah. And the ball would fall out of. I can't remember who it was, but I kept reading over and over again in all the literature that everyone was trying to get to this place, this space. And so for us, we just, when we started doing the breathing and we were having this experience ourselves, and then we were seeing other people having it, we're like, okay, this creates some kind of space where people can catch that genius.
Yeah, totally. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, what I've noticed as well is that when people have a tendency to hold on to an agenda or hold on to have to be a certain way, the space doesn't really get created as easy. And then it sort of becomes an internal battle during a session until such time where the energy is so high, you've got no choice but to let go.
Yeah.
Like trying to look at your eyes in the mirror.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. Just shadow.
No, I interestingly, and of course, I can give you a model to explain that, Angie.
Oh.
Let me turn my iPad on.
Now for the people that are listening to this, you're gonna have to come and watch the video, because this is worth watching.
Yeah. So I'll walk through it in explanation terms as well. I've got a cartoon of a fellow lying on the road, and a car's just about to hit him. And the caption says, "Encumbered with a low self-image, Bob takes a job as a speed bump." And imagine you're Bob's team leader, and you say, you ask Bob, "What do you do for a living?" And so if you can't see this, if you picture a typical organizational chart, just with layers and 4 layers, 4 levels, a typical organizational chart. So one box at the top where the CEO would typically sit, a couple of boxes underneath where some directors might be, and then a level below that where you might have middle managers and supervisors, and then a level right at the bottom where all the work is being done. And Bob lies on the road, and he, encumbered with low self-image, Bob takes a job as a speed bump. And I become Bob's new team leader, and I say to Bob, "Bob, why? For what purpose would we have you lying on the road, doing this job?" Now, by the way, if we said to Bob, "What do you do for a living?" what would he say?
I'm a speed bump.
I'm a speed bump, because most people define themselves by their job title. Mm-hmm. Seldom would someone say, "I'm a great dad." Yeah, hey, what do you do for a living? Well, primarily I'm a great dad. I do work as well, but do you know what I mean? We define ourselves by our job. And the job and most job titles in organizations are nothing more than a description of the primary task. I'm a speed bump, I'm an admin officer, I'm a project manager, I'm a salesperson. They're just a description of the primary task. What do you do for a living, Bob? I'm a speed bump. Why? We chunk people up through this hierarchy with the question why. Why? For what purpose would we have you lying on the road being a speed bump? And he might say, well, because I work in the traffic slowing process. So the next level up is he's a speed bump doing tasks inside a process. And the question would be, is a speed bump in a traffic slowing process valuable? And most people, when I ask that question in conferences and things, say yes. Well, not on an autobahn in Europe. Because everything is context dependent. Context gives everything meaning. Context is why. So all of this work down here in organizations, processes, task, and activity has no inherent value of its own without context. It's just work. So Bob, why? For what purpose would we have you working in the traffic slowing process? And he might say, to make the drivers drive more safely. Now that's valuable. Safer drivers. And that's an outcome. And we can measure that. We could get some stats around that. We could measure that. But I want to push Bob a bit further, because even though he says to have safer drivers, I can still see that his energy isn't engaged. He's walking through the process. So I ask him one more time, Bob, why? For what purpose would we have you lying on the road, slowing traffic down in the traffic slowing process in order to have safer drivers? And at that point, Bob will probably say to me, I don't know, you're the boss, you tell me. Because people only jump up a couple of levels above their normal thinking level, where they spend most of their time. Not their intelligence level, just where they spend most of their thinking time. And so I say to Bob, okay, Bob, look, 100 metres up the road, there's a school bus pick-up and drop-off point, and we know with some certainty that if we don't have the kids and cars under control when they come together, one day a child will die. And so you're not really a speed bump. What you're doing is you're protecting children's lives in school zones. What's just happened, if Bob was supposed to start at 8 a.m. and he thinks he's a speed bump, what time will he let us know if he's going to take a sick day?
Probably about 8:30.
8:30. Now that Bob knows he's protecting kids' lives, he may still take a sick day, but what time will he tell us?
The day before.
The day before. Everything's changed, right?
Yeah.
Here's the problem. How do you measure that? How do you measure protecting kids' lives? The number of deaths is not a measure of the success, it's a measure of the failure. An absence of death could be down to luck. Like, how do we measure that? This is compelling, self-evident, incontestable value. And if you put 100 reasonable people in the room and say, should we be prepared to do to protect kids' lives? They will say, whatever it takes. So this value is context. and value equals problem. And people seldom argue over the problem. People always argue over the solution. Everything below the line is solution. Should we focus on the drivers, or should we focus on road design? Or should we focus on vehicle design? Should we have a traffic slowing process, or should we have Bob lying on the road, or have him standing up with a flag and a brightly coloured uniform? Everyone argues over the solution because everyone thinks they've got a better agenda, was the word you used, Angie. But people seldom argue over compelling, self-evident, incontestable value. So, you know, one of the things that you're both familiar with is the genius model and what we call the sweet spot of the genius model. And the sweet spot of the genius model is about attaching this to a business's story, finding the compelling, self-evident, incontestable value that a business provides to the marketplace so that no one's ever going to disagree with it. And if you take a customer to that place, you change the dynamic of the whole conversation, because everything else is now being communicated in the context of that. But if you say to a customer, what we do is, you know, if you say to a customer down here, you know, let's say in your case, if you say to a customer down here, what we're going to do is show you some breathing techniques. That's like a speed bump. They go, oh, I don't know if I'm into that.
Yes, we've heard
well, it's a solution that I might not be, or it's a task or an activity. I don't have the time for it, right? But if you said to the customer, but the reason we're doing that is because it's a pretty simple routine that you can put in place that'll give you really, you know, all the energy you're going to need to succeed. They're going, okay, get that. But ultimately, really, this is about your absolute, true, authentic, untapped potential, and you being able to access it any time you want. Isn't that what you really want? Who doesn't want to be able to get into their true, untapped potential at will? Who doesn't want to do that?
I don't know many. Well, maybe my daughter sometimes.
Well, yeah, not today. It's compelling, self-evident, incontestable value, right?
Yeah.
And so Angie, what you said before that was really interesting. I mean, as soon as you said it, this model popped into my mind. We spend 90% of our time below the line.
Yeah.
And less than 10%, or some people, no time above the line thinking about that level, right? And so to become more creative, you can't become creative down here. If we want to find a creative way to structurally find a creative way to address this issue, other than the speed bump, we can't become creative by looking sideways, because we're just looking at the same level. Does that make sense? And so to really start to stretch creative thinking, you need to go at least 2 levels up and go, why? So you're mimicking this context. Why do we want safer drivers? Oh, and what you'll arrive at is because we want to protect kids' lives in school zones. Okay, what is a better way for us to do that? A more creative way. And then you come back down again, and you come down through what? What is a better way for us to do that? But it's attached to the highest level of agreed, compelling, self-evident, and incontestable value. If we got to this level of safer drivers and everybody said, absolutely, safer drivers, we need that no matter what, whatever we have to do to get safer drivers, I've hit compelling, self-evident, incontestable value there. I don't need to go higher. So that's actually a reason in itself, safer drivers. What do we need to do other than having people lie on the road to have safer drivers? You can see the lack of thinking in the political debates that we have in this country, amongst others, because most political discussion is sort of down here, right? So there is a structural way of thinking about creativity as well. The takeaway for listeners, of course, is to, there's a challenge in there. How clear are you about the compelling, self-evident, and incontestable value your business provides to the marketplace? And do you have a way of explaining that do you have a way of explaining that so that, you guys are familiar with the genius model, but do you have a way of explaining that so that the customer knows that your compelling self-evident, incontestable value that you deliver to them is in the middle, and that your business is, they are at the heart of your business, and then everything else around here just happens to be, what you do to make that middle bit happen. Do you have a way of explaining that in your business? So the customer goes, I'm at the heart of the business, and this compelling, self-evident, incontestable value, they feel wrapped around. So creativity is structural, and it's, it's philosophical, and it's intellectual. Do the thinking, go deep. And so I think what you guys do, for me, with breathing, it's fast access to this. It's fast access back to the point at which everyone would agree that's the reason why we're doing this. That's the value. You find that space, it actually fills itself. You just create the space. Here's the thing about compelling, self-evident, incontestable value. If you create the space, it just shows up.
Yeah. And specific for each person.
Totally.
For what they need.
Totally. Yeah. But it's self-evident, compelling, and incontestable. So if you create a space, it shows up.
Yeah.
There's a thing. Let's address that. Now we can get into solution mode. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, I just went through a complete hero's journey just watching this, because Shane and I have spent 2 years at dinner parties trying to explain to people what it is that we do and why we do it. And we've talked in circles and circles and circles and had many funny faces from people. But it wasn't until that we went through this process with you where we were kind of forced to go deep.
Yeah.
And to create the space to go, well, what is it really for? And what this makes me think of is like, yes, it's great for those that even have a home business. I mean, Shane and I, we're a husband and wife team. So what this process has done for us is helped us to align with our value up there. And then also being able to share that to, our audience or clients or partners and these sorts of things. And it makes it so much more clear because of exactly what you just said.
Yeah, your best ideas need to become understandable, agreeable, and transportable.
Yeah.
And if we applied this model to you guys, there is an argument that you could make that what you do is protect people's inner lives. So who doesn't want to do that? Who doesn't want a way of protecting their inner life? Because we're all so busy living the outer life, and going inwards pretty scary. But who doesn't want to protect their inner life? And inner life is that untapped potential. So why do breathing? Well, it's a really good routine to get into. It's a good habit to get into, but it's a good habit because it's going to give you energy to succeed, energy to implement. It is the fueling mechanism on a daily basis. But why do you want to do that? Why do you want energy? Because it's a key component of really living a fulfilled inner life. And everyone thinks what they're trying to do is live a fulfilled external or outer life. And
the internal life is the only thing that you have control over. Totally. So it's a way of feeling like you have control of your life without trying to control your life.
Yeah. Interesting word, control.
Yeah, I know.
So that's so it's just interesting. You think about the average organizational chart. When we draw this for people, it puts a lot of heat on CEOs. Because the CEO is the protector of the compelling and self-evident and incontestable value of the business. But if you're the founder of the business, if you're the entrepreneur that started the business, how well are you protecting that creative thought you had one day in the shower that spawned this business that has now become super busy, lots of moving parts, and is dragging you away from that highest level of creative value? And the reason it's easy to get dragged away from the highest level of I'll tell you what the nemesis of creativity is measurement. The moment you measure something, you lose connection to value and you start measuring moving parts. And one of the problems we have in the business world today, people say, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And so if you can't measure it, it doesn't count. Well, it's true. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. But if you can measure it, it might not be making as big a difference as it possibly could. So tell me how you measure. Tell me how you measure the feelings of amazement and joy and wonder you get when you're watching an extraordinary musician playing a wildly complex piece of music that just happens to be your favorite piece of music.
The only thing I can think of is like through brainwaves.
I don't think so, Simon. I don't think you're supposed to measure an experience.
No, of course.
I think an experience is something that is unique to you because you're the one observing it. I don't think that it requires measurement. And I really like what you said and where we are right now, because obviously we are in the business world, and I have never been one that liked to measure things. I like for something to appear and then to be able to creatively think of how am I going to deal with this situation? What does it require from me?
Yep.
What do I need to do to, so this does spark a lot of interest in me. And I think that for anyone listening that is in that space of where their business is starting to choke them, and we call that your passion choking you,
suffocated by your
being
passion.
Suffocated, that this is definitely somewhere that you'll want to come and consider putting some time into this, because it's just, I've been at workshops, we've been at workshops with you where there's been 200 people in the room, and I've seen people come to almost tears when they've sat with their model and gone, oh, I just got it onto paper.
We've got models are profound, and like anyone that creates something, you don't realize how deep it is until you let other people use it. There is a key lesson in that for everyone. Whatever you create, it can be the most profound thing, but it only blooms into its fullest representation when other people take it and use it. And I'll give you an example in a minute which emotionally affected me in terms of how one of our models is being used. But I just want to close out this measurement thing. And we said, how would you measure the joy of experiencing a fabulous musician playing your favorite piece of music? And Angie, you said maybe we could measure brainwaves or stuff, right? The moment you measure it, the magic disappears.
Yeah.
As soon as I know it's brainwaves, I go, all right then. So it's not so special. And if someone, and I learned to play the guitar, I play music, and I understand that music is really just a series of steps and half steps. It's mathematics. Music is maths. But that's not what makes a great piece of music. What makes a great piece of music is the feel that the musician has, and the attack on the instrument, and their musicality. You can't do that mathematically. So anyone can play music if they learn the math and practice. But great music is played with feel. Your blues is all feel, right? And so you can't measure deep, true value, and the act of measuring it takes the creative value away from it. It's a bit like I studied magic so I could use it in keynote speeches and stuff. And the moment you learn magic, the magic of magic disappears. Because even when you're watching a magician, you know what they're doing. And the only thought you have is, I just didn't see it. And so all it becomes is really great skill. But I watch any magician now, I know how they're doing the trick. And if I didn't see it, it's only because they're super skillful. And that takes a lot of the magic away. I go, so they've just practiced a lot. It just takes a lot of the magic away, right? So measurement is the nemesis of creativity. If you're moving into a creative thought process, do not start with, how would I measure this? Forget it. And that's why finding space is so important. And then the other thing is, be less fascinated with statistical purity and be more interested in evidence. Evidence is observable, but it might not be statistically pure. So if you drag yourself into work every day and you feel tired and depleted and unenthusiastic, that's pretty good evidence your passion has gone. But if you bounce out of bed in the morning, do a breathing, catch some morning sunlight, put on some blue light blocking glasses, drink a ton of water, keep up with you guys in an exercise routine. I've seen your arms, Shane. And then fly into work full of juice. That's pretty good evidence. But there's no statistical measurement in that. But evidence is actually more important. You know, observable evidence is more important than statistics. But, you know, and really for all of us, the most profound things become valuable when somebody else uses them. We have we've got a lot of clients in the US, and a fellow reached out to us just this week and said, here's what I'm doing with your 4 futures model. So I'm just going to do this as 2 futures. The futures model says, if this is your situation today, a horizontal line going from the left across to the right for those that can't see it. So on the left is your situation today. On the right is your future. Curving downwards from today, curving down and to the right from today, increasing in how steep that curve is as you get closer towards the future, is a bad situation. It's red line. Curving upward from where you are today and getting steeper as time goes on is a green line that take you to your ideal situation. So you've got this red line curving downward to a bad future and a green line curving upwards to a great future. And the red line occurs if we just drift day after day. And the green line occurs if we take action day after day. So this fellow in the US reached out to us this week and said, I just want to tell you, if I get nothing out of what you guys do with models, the 2 futures model has meant everything. He said, where I grew up in the US, most of my friends are dead, either from drugs or gunshot. I became really successful, and now I do a bunch of work in the homeless shelters. And I use the 2 futures model, and it changes everything. So imagine a conversation with someone in a homeless shelter saying, mate, if you stay here, if you keep drifting, draw the model, if you keep drifting, you're going to die. And they go, I'm not afraid of death. I can imagine someone in a homeless shelter saying, I'm not really afraid of death. But, you know, as you sit here today, this is where you are. There's a lot of bad stuff that can happen between now and death. And no matter how far away from the green line you feel right now, you're also right now as close as you're ever going to be to that green line. Why don't you let me help you jump lines? And if all you do is jump onto the green line and stay there, isn't that better than this? That almost brought me to tears, hearing somebody using that model in a homeless shelter. But if you're dealing with someone in a homeless shelter, you can talk about everything else. You can talk about all the science. You can talk about all the data. You can talk about, you know, this is, look at your health, but that will work. And if that makes one person, if that has made one person get off the red line, my life's work's done.
Yeah.
And I would never in my life have seen that model having an application in a homeless shelter.
Yeah.
Right? It's a model that popped into my head. It's sold millions of dollars worth of product for people when it's tailored to the business. But it's probably also saved lives. That's pretty exciting, you know. So you guys had better take your breathing and save some inner lives.
That's why we've got
Thanks
the model,
to you,
Simon.
working on it. Yes.
You get people off their red line inner life onto the green line inner life. And,
Yeah. Well, we made the jump first.
Yeah, you did. You sure did.
Yeah, and the value is perceived mostly by the observer. And I love what you said, Simon, about it becomes most powerful when you can explain that value that you hold to others.
Yeah.
Or
And
someone
then-
else can
Or
explain
someone
it.
else.
And then they can transport it. That's when
Yes.
it's valuable. So
Yeah. That's
Wow.
brilliant. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I have a couple of questions for you before we wrap up here.
Yeah.
And one, I think I know what some of it is that you're going to say, but I'd love to hear your perspective of this. I've thoroughly enjoyed this time so far, and it's made me even think even further. Going, like if anyone, okay, for me, I'm inspired to create more space.
Yeah.
And as a mom, it's very difficult to stop
Mm-hmm.
and create the space. And for me, the one thing that I've gotten out of this is stop and create some space to connect to your genius. So thank you for that. The first question I want to ask you is, what are 3 key habits that move the needle the most for you, that, give you the edge in your life, that have you feel that you enjoy the ride?
Yeah, so apart from showering a lot and using waterproof paper, yeah, okay. You mean other than that? 3 other things. Okay.
Well, you can incorporate it if you'd like.
Yeah. It's a character. It's a personality trait that I've turned into a habit, and that is insatiable curiosity. My father was an incredibly curious man, and my first role model in life, and he passed on that curiosity to all of us. If we asked him a question about how should I do that, or he'd go, have a go and then come back, or how does this work, Dad? Pull it apart and have a look. That's your lawnmower though, Dad. That's okay. I can put it back together if you mess up. Pull it apart and have a look. So we did, so insatiable curiosity has driven my tendency to look deep at things and research and study. So there's no doubt that study and, just consuming some of the best material I can find has been huge for me. I've got a substantial library. I consume material at a rate. I use a lot of audible techniques now to consume material. I read very little, fiction. I do that in the holidays for relaxation. Honestly, I can get curious about anything, and I think that's served me incredibly well. I've turned it into a habit. It's a thing I do. It's something I consciously do.
Awesome.
The second thing that has moved the dial for me was doing my thinking through drawing, through the models. That's absolutely shifted the dial for me, and I fell into it. When I started out in electrics and electronics, an electrical circuit is invisible other than the diagram on paper, the model of the circuit on paper. And all of your diagnostic work is done on that diagram. And so that's kind of where it first started. And so my first thought now, when there's something I've got to work on, I do 2 things. I chunk back up to why are we even doing this. I do a lot of project management work with large corporations, and most projects go off the rails at the start. Not because they haven't mapped out what they're going to do properly. It's because they haven't understood why they're doing it. So go back to, what's the motivation for the project? I'm not interested in the project plan and scope. I want to know the motivation for the project. And I reckon 90% of the time that I ask that, no one can tell me the answer. Like, why have you got this project to implement a new CRM? Because we need a new CRM. Well, that is not a reason. Give me a better reason. The old one's no good. Still not a good reason. Like, why? What's the purpose here? So I do 2 things. I try to find my way back to, why would this even matter? Like, why is it important for me to understand this? And then I unpack it through a model. And interestingly, I generally just start with geometry. I just draw a shape. And then I go, does that shape work? Can I fill it in? I'm drawing spaces. If I've got to do conscious, awake kind of thinking, like logical thinking, I just create spaces on paper with a shape, and then I just start filling the shape in, and eventually I go, that shape doesn't work. Well, I'll get another shape. And so I actually always start with the geometry. What's the shape that this thing feels like it's got to it? And then I fill the spaces in. That served me incredibly well. And then the third thing I think that's shifted the dial for me a lot, I place a lot of emphasis on the performance of the delivery. So I spent time in musical theatre in my teenage years, and I've lectured at university, I've taught, I've been in front of large audiences a lot. I mentioned that I studied magic so I could deliver a more engaging and curiosity-based keynote presentation and things. There is no denying the power of the performance itself. And people don't put anywhere near enough time into the art of the performance. So don't just get up and speak without thinking your way through it and at least having practiced the parts that were lumpy. When you're really confident that you can get up in front of people and hold a performance without preparation, that's great. But until that point, do the work. The art of the performance, like a great screenplay acted by really bad actors, it is a rubbish movie.
Yep.
The art of the performance. So those three things, really, probably insatiable curiosity, finding why this thing is even important for me to understand and creating spaces in a model, and then paying attention to the performance art, what we call the choreography, walking through a model. So yeah, those three things, I think I keep coming back to them all the time.
Yeah. Oh, and I've seen them in action actually.
And what's gold about that, Simon, is that when you would generally ask somebody that question, they would come up with habits that were like, oh, well, I do this in the morning, or something. And what I really like about what you just shared then is these are habits that are to do with creativity, but they're also to do with, something that's not necessarily physical.
No.
Which is a great contrast for us to have.
And has a lot of heart.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm probably not on point with the physical stuff as much as I'm over energized from here up. That's kind of action happens. We need to balance.
Cool. Now, before we wrap up, Simon, what is it that gets you out of bed in the morning? What juices you the most?
Sure. We've got a lot of problems in the world, and globally and inside individual countries. And, geographical and political boundaries are artificial by and large. And, poverty's on the decline globally. Mental health problems are on the increase. And humans are not the best thing that ever happened to the planet. But I do think, and there's a huge qualifier on this, the best force for good that we have on the planet is business. If it's in the hands of the right leaders, that's the big qualifier. Hasn't always been in the hands of the right leaders, and goodness knows government hasn't always been in the hands of the right leaders, but government can't create an impact like business can. And so we're seeing the rise of social enterprise and things like that, where people are finally going, actually, it's got to be a great business first. Then you can choose to do whatever you like with the profit. But as long as you're going and asking for handouts, that's always a zero-sum game. Why don't we make a great business? But business has changed the world. And, so business and enterprise in the hands of the right leaders is the greatest force for good we've got on the planet. I truly believe that to be true. And so the thing that saddens me the most is I meet extraordinary business owners and founders and entrepreneurs that have had a great idea that they've turned into a business, and they just can't get traction because they don't know how to take the idea deeper and then communicate it.
Tell me about it.
And so, my whole life is about, I know how to help that. And that just excites me. And I'll tell you what, every time I unpack models for somebody else, I've just acquired a bunch of knowledge.
Yeah.
You can't unpack a model without learning about it, So my natural curiosity is served by what I think I'm brought here to do, which is help people, take a big idea and turn it into a communication that can be agreed, understood, and transported easily. That's what gets me up every morning. I'm dedicated to my family and to the West Coast Eagles, my football club, current AFL champions as we head into the next season. So that just timestamps the podcast. So I'm pretty interested in all of those sorts of things. I like riding my bike and all that sort of stuff. But what gets me going? we've got some serious responsibilities, and business for me, at least from my perspective, business is a big key to that.
Yeah.
And, Bill Gates wouldn't be able to do anything that he does had he not built a great business first.
Yep.
So, it just saddens me when people have got these great ideas like you guys. Like I've done it. I've done the breathing. I've been in the space, and unless you can communicate it, it's hard for anyone else to access it. Yeah, that's what excites me.
Yeah. Awesome. And that in turn transfers over here to us, because the work that we've done with you has excited us, and we finally feel like we've connected with that value and with that purpose, and we're able to share that. And we're still going to be working on that, but I think that's half the joy. Playing with your value.
Well, and a model gives you a framework to keep opening it up. So it gives you a base to start from, but you can keep going deeper below that, and that's the key. That's the key.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And for the person who's listening, who wants to connect with you, who wants to do some work, who wants to go deep and unpack their genius and go deep on their own personal values and be able to express that in there, how do they get, where's the best place to contact you?
They should just go to the website. So Models Method, MODELS method.com. There's a page on there that talks a little bit about the genius model. There's a page of quick videos where I do my drawing on the glass that you've seen, where I draw models.
I love that. So innovative.
And a bunch of stuff about models and what we do and how we work. That's absolutely the best place for them to go. There's some tools that they can download, or some information they can download, things like that, and reach out and we'll take it from there.
Okay, brilliant. And we'll also put the links in the show notes too, so they can click on it. One click to contact. I love.
Great. Thank you, Simon.
Thank you for your time, Simon. We love connecting with you.
And all the work that we've done with you. We really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on.
Yes, you truly are dedicated to your work. Thank you.
Thank you too. All right, guys.
All right, take care.
Bye.